You are now listening to Talking Transparency, a podcast where trans parents talk transparently. Hosted by Cody Connor, Melissa Luxon, and Thea Ross.
Welcome to Talking Transparency. I'm Melissa Luxon.
I'm Cody Connor.
And I'm Thea Ross.
Well, today we are going to be talking about what does being a trans ally mean? So I would like to say that being an ally for me means always standing up. Every time. Doing the work. Talking in the community. And that is what, and I mean, from a broad level, I should say. What about you, Cody?
I mean, when I think of a ally, just, my own personal interpretation of even who an ally to me is somebody that's fighting with me in common cause. Now, on the broader scale, too, part of that is somebody that's also willing to make that sacrifice for me and with me for that cause.
Absolutely. I don't know if you want my take on this.
Absolutely.
Of course we do.
I feel like an ally is usually like two raccoons in a dress. Outside of that, I think your definitions are really apt. I think if I picture it, it's like, okay, we are standing against a line of people and they're throwing rocks or they're throwing insults or they're attacking us with bullets and you are standing shoulder to shoulder. You didn't run away. That's what it means to be an ally. I mean, whether you're talking about in war, whether you're talking about on the playgrounds, whether you're talking about in life, that's an ally to me. Like, do you stand with me?
Right.
When it matters. Not maybe all the time, but when it matters, because we all have time where we can't be there. But
well, I also think too that a lot of people throw around ally, and they're an ally on their social media, and they'll put that little background, right? But what about when your favorite comedian or your favorite musician or your mom makes homophobic, transphobic, racist, bigoted comments?
And then also insist that they're an ally. That's my favorite part.
Oh, yeah, well.
The Dave Chappelle's who are, come up and make jokes about,
Right.
Fake genitals and then come out and say, hey, but I'm an ally. Lowers the bar.
Right. And so I think that is something that also needs to be said, is that we need to have more allies speaking up when it matters. It's not just about going to the parade or putting up a background on your Instagram or social or your any social media sites. It's more than that, and it's also making sure that you're not doing harm in that community by your own actions, because you are not. You're coming from a place of allyship. What do you think about that? I know you see some folks, like you said, like you got your David Chappelle's. What about with our families or social circles?
We like to believe that that's where we have most of our allies, but in a lot of times that's where people fall silent. And to me, I don't even know so much if it's about allyship in that framework where we are right now, as much as it is about the folks who are allies knowing what to do back. Because, we can talk about allyship in my definition, standing with the stones getting thrown, so to speak, in a metaphor. Yeah. But if you have no means to stop that, and if you have no means to fight back, how long can you expect your allies to stand there with you? So I think sometimes also when we talk about allyship, it's about giving people the tools to defend themselves and defend you. And I'm here to talk about the Calos Coalition itself. And one of the things that I think is the most potent thing that we're putting forward with the Calos Coalition is this idea of the trans family. When I think about allies and I think about all the hateful things that people say, an ally to me really is going to stand up and say, well, what about the trans families? Not just about worrying about the trans kids. What about the trans parents? Folks like you who are cis parents of trans kids, and then also folks who are trans parents of cis kids. Because we're talking about the ability to have families, to have lives, to have homes, jobs, and futures. And those are the things that if someone's not willing to fight for that for me, then we're not in common cause. Because ultimately I want that for them. for all of my neighbors, to them to have families and homes and jobs to thrive. But if someone looks at me and says, I don't want you to thrive, or I want you to thrive, but.
And they don't want you to thrive because it makes them uncomfortable. Because that's always my thing. Like, what is that? Why don't you want other people to thrive? In general, but specifically, we talk about trans people, and that is, you actually said something I hadn't, trans parents with cisgender children. Like, I think because we're cisgendered parents, I immediately just, when I think about, parents, I go, oh, well, the parents are cisgendered. And then even just not having, people, there are people that don't even understand that there are trans folks with children that have families.
Some of my best friends are trans folks that have kids, that have cis kids that don't have trans kids. Some of them are trans folks that have trans kids. There are folks who have all different, when we talk about unconventional families, whether we're talking about the modern family, literally on television, or we're talking about this modern conception that, it doesn't necessarily have to be blood or these chosen family. And that's a big thing in the LGBT for lots of different reasons. It's big in the trans community, but then there's this idea that trans people can't reproduce. And that's not true. A lot of times, even after you've started hormones, I mean, obviously, if you have certain surgeries and things, not to get into graphics or specifics, there's things that are or aren't possible. But then it's also most of that. There are ways that you can still have, children. And if you can't have children before, most trans people have kids beforehand, or they make plans for that if it's something that's sincerely important to them. And I think it's just something that people. They make those stereotypes. And to me, I want people to picture a trans family, not, the picture of a trans kid or whatever people are putting out, because that is a picture of a trans family, but the lot beyond that, not hyper focusing on these vulnerable kids, but focusing on their siblings, the parents behind them, the cousins, the community that loves them, because we're a small subset, but we are so much bigger as a family. And that's one of the things why I'm so grateful for both of you.
Well, that's awesome. I do want to hear about the Calos Coalition. I mean, I'm familiar with Calos Coalition. Cody is as well. But we would really like for you to share goals, mission, and what is the Calos Coalition and why did you start it?
Excellent. That's a good one. I should lay that one out. The Calos Coalition is a nonprofit that I founded about 6 or 7 months ago. It's relatively new, but the word Calos actually comes from the ancient Greek word for beauty. It's a non-gendered word, Calos, Kallos. We kind of modernized it to the Calos spelling, just because it's easier to remember and type in the computer. But then also, we wanted to be the beautiful non-gendered or the beautiful pan-gendered coalition, because we really do want to be a bridge and a gap to stand up and unite a lot of these other nonprofits and organizations in ways, and then find ways to fill those gaps, and the ethos behind it really comes down to beauty. And it's not some objective measure like, oh, you have to weigh this much, you have to be this tall or whatever. It's not even so much about gender or about a style. It's about that light that comes from inside someone when they are supported, when they are walking in who they are, and when it's almost like a flow state. When someone is who they are, they cannot help but, and there's certain conditions are met around them. Let's be face it. All of us struggle to thrive without material support. But when you come together with those certain elements, people glow. And when those people shine, the community around them glows and shines, and we all bask in that light. And that's something that I think is beautiful. I think that's what the essence of beauty is. And if we as a community and as a country are going to focus so much about bodies and gender and all these things, why don't we focus more about beauty and family and community? Because these are the conversations that are right adjacent and behind these ones that they're attacking kids for. These are the ground that I want my allies to pick up and fight with. Because when we give more stories like the trans people who are thriving, the folks who own businesses, the people that are out there killing it, that are absolutely thriving, people who are musicians, artists, business people, you find hope in these kids right now that are struggling and being attacked. Trans people, they need to find that hope. So if you want to be my ally, you want to stand next to me, and we're all getting pelted with the rocks, it seems to me what I can do and why the Calos Coalition is here is to give those folks tools to push back, for us to put those works, excellence, and joy of trans folks front and center, so that whenever you have these conversations, it's reflexive. Because you think about all these other people that you know, these families and that you know in your community. One of the statistics that really shocked me is that how many police officers do you think there are in the country, the whole country?
Oh, man, I actually used to know the statistic.
247,000.
Yeah, I want to.
Actually, that's pretty low. I think it's somewhere around 800, 900,000.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
picked
I
a
was gonna
random
say-
good,
set of
No,
numbers.
it's actually 800. I literally am like, I did a speech on this 2 years ago. It's actually 800, about 800,000.
But if
you're right.
if you look at the percentage of trans people, what the numbers right now, according to the latest surveys, put about like 1.6 million. So there's actually, on average, probably almost twice as many trans people as are police officers. But how many folks do you know that know police officers in their lives or have had experiences? And then how many folks do you say, oh, I've never met a trans person before? Some of that comes to the fact that we are in the closet, or that we are passing and living our lives and you wouldn't even know if we were in your life. And then the other part of it is that we hide, and that's because folks don't accept us. When allies make it and make that space for us and come out and have those conversations, when we do it ourselves, and that is its own politics and its own part of our existence that we have to do, having allies that prepare the spaces and push beyond that, that's what we need, because we're watching the activists on the other side close these spaces and try to fight in that way. And that's the ground that I see.
And I think, like you were talking about, that focus on family, that highlighting of the families in the trans and LGBTQ community is so important, because when you look at the way that's looked at throughout society, the trans people and LGBTQ people are very much outside of families. Families are on one side of the conversation, and this is a bunch of singular people, completely separate. It's part of how we isolate the community through a conversation in the way we don't talk about families, acting as if they're not families, and acting as if when they are families that it is so different than everybody else's family some way. When you really look at it, what is the difference? They're teaching their children to try and do things well and be kind to people and do their best in school. They're eating dinner. They're going to the movies.
They're playing sports. They're
playing
packing
sports.
lunches. They're going to work. Like,
it is just another family like every other family. And it's really, highlighting that shows just how normal,
confined to a box we are. That's what that shows me.
But
absolutely. And I think it goes even beyond just the idea of a normalized family, but it's about, can we see these families thrive? Can they not just exist, but can these people grow into their community and have that space? But continue, sorry.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I think that's part of why that conversation gets built like that, is to prevent that thriving through the community, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's very much, you look at it, and I was actually talking to a local politician that we both know, Melissa.
Oh.
And she was telling me about how, changing the way she dressed and the different advice to play the game, running the campaign, etc. One of the things she really keyed, that really, really stuck with me, that she said, is they want you to look like they might hang out with you.
Mm.
Right? Mm. And that's part of how conversations are had about different people, to create that separation. No, you wouldn't hang out with them. They're not the same as you. You don't have anything in common.
Mm-hmm. When really, right? Most of us have a lot.
When really, most of what's going on in all of our lives is in common. Mm-hmm. And the only way to keep people isolated and to ostracize certain groups and to keep them from thriving in the community by being a part of the community and being supported and working with the community is to somehow have the conversation in a way
it's othering,
that others them and focuses on something that doesn't actually even impact anything that has to do with how your family actually functions.
And we can talk about the harm that causes, the malice that's behind that. Mm-hmm. We can talk about those things that manifest themselves. But why? Why are those things? It's coercion and control at its root. And what really gets me is that there are folks who will throw their children out on the streets There are, how many homeless children are there? I think it's somewhere around 90,000 is the current estimate, somewhere 91,000, somewhere there. And we have the luxury to talk about protecting children, but what about the parents that refuse to even take care of their under 18-year-old children?
And aren't brought on charges.
That would make the argument of religious liberty. Can we not discuss that? Is there not space to push back and say, what about those kids? And then the other thing about it is like this idea of a trans family. And you know this, Cody, because this is the whole reason why we have our trans family dinner program, is that a lot of those kids, because of that, whether it is so extreme as to be tossed out, or it is the ostracization that meets you every day when you come in from the door, those experiences put those people on the outside of their family, and not just the outside of their family, but outside of the resources, the love, the support of that family. And then that, we wonder why these kids sometimes struggle with mental health issues that go to the negativity. We wonder why there are worse economic outcomes. We wonder why there's this vulnerability that exists in the trans populations, whether it be trans masculine or trans feminine. And it seems pretty obvious to me that it comes down to, were they loved? Did they get that support? And this idea of a trans family is something that I think is very radical, because we're starting these family dinners. This is your idea, where we're going to say, hey, I'm already doing this as a trans parent. I'm already doing this as someone who is in my community and helping my family, at my school, whatever that kid needs to eat. If this kid wants to come over, I'm there and I'm supporting as much as I can, because you're a wholesome well, let's take that. Let's get more parents. Let's empower more folks that have a backgrounds in working with the child development things, and get those folks coordinated. Let's get those people resources, and let's make more real in-person events. Just to drop statistics really quick, I'm sorry, is also the Trevor Project did its first ever survey in 2023 on trans and gender nonconforming youth. And they identified that only 17% say that they have any affirming space in real life outside of school and home. And in school and home, none of those numbers got above 60%. So on average, about a third or more of trans and gender nonconforming youth don't have a space. And then even beyond that, even if you have a parent who is there, where are the spaces in real life? You can go online. There's some wonderful support groups and spaces online, but we know as a community we can do more, and that's what we're doing.
That's amazing. And I think it's important there's a couple things that I pull away from the trans family dinner, which is, I think it's really important for trans youth to be in spaces with trans adults.
Thank you. Yes.
Because they need so many, in the statistics, data is available, people. So many trans youth do not see themselves as a 30-year-old or as a 40-year-old. And I think that having spaces where you can come in and have conversations, and then you have parents who, we're all going through this. I together, really, and for parents to be able to openly talk about the struggles. The last episode, I spoke about when I dip into my memory bank, and I will sometimes accidentally misgender my child. And it's because when I dip into my memory bank, but that awareness for me, right? Do I have guilt when I do that? Immediate. Right. And I'm hard on myself, because I say, why can't you just remember that? 99% of the time you do, but there's that one, I'm really hard on myself. And so being able to share that with other parents is valuable to me, just for as a parent, and then to also, be able to say, I've been through this. This is how I handled this, right? Or I don't know how to handle this. How did you handle this, right? How did you, how did you begin to go out into your social circles, right? Because that's something that you've got your trans youth, they're in their social circles at school. And then when your child begins to transition, you have to have these conversations with your family, with your friends, and how did you do that successfully? And so all of these things are really important. And so the trans family dinner I just find to be so valuable for so many reasons, but mostly for these young people to see and interact with adults and listen to their shared experiences.
You are so correct. When I was going to the school board at the beginning of the year before I founded the Calos Coalition, because I graduated from Virginia Beach schools back in 2010, back years and years ago. I went on to coach policy debate for a couple of years, and I care a lot about the schools. A lot of my teachers became friends, and a lot of those teachers, I still keep in touch with. I want to see them thrive, and I want to see our community thrive. And when I think about going to the school board meetings and sitting in the back or going up to speak and listening to these kids, some of them trans themselves, having the courage to come speak out as trans kids. And, I was scared. Here I am, a trans adult years later. I'm shaking in my boots to go up there and say something. And, they get up and they say, I've never seen a trans person with gray hair. And it just like sucks the air out of my chest, because I'm like, come down to the STRC. I know a bunch of girls. They don't even want to open the gray hairs. They don't have gray hairs. What are you talking about? But no, that's the point, is like, there's also this diaspora. And I use that word. It's a loaded word because a lot of times it refers to, the Jewish history, but it also comes down to this, like, being broken apart, because naturally we may not, our trans sibs, so to speak, the people that are trans folks who have trans sibs, family, so on and so speak. We might not be blood related. We may not even meet each other. We may not go to the same schools or be in the same neighborhoods. And those sorts of things, they all add up. And that knowledge that you get, cultural knowledge that's exchanged in the Black community and in any sort of familial or cultural setting, whether it be in a church, that's lost. Yeah. And then to bring this back around to what you were talking about, Cody, the malice and the harm and the control, forcing folks into closets, painting people like me, painting trans adults like pedophiles, or as if we're somehow sexual or sexual. That's all to try to create a wall between us, to scatter us to the winds, to silo us, is a lot of the terms that I would use, so that us as trans adults are scared. So that we don't want to be around kids because we may be seen as a certain type of way. But I refuse to do that, because I know for a fact I care about this community on a deep level. And that means caring about the elderly folks and the kids. That means caring about my trans sibs and the other folks in this community. But I'm sorry, I could rant forever.
No, I mean, and you see that even in the trans family dinner, even in watching people that came to the first one and then also went to the second one, the difference in their interactions and the kind of, especially when people first get there and they're first sitting down. And I kind of make an effort. I make sure I go and say hi to everybody and thank everybody for being there and kind of make sure that I touch with everybody, because what you can observe very, very much is a community of people that have been isolated.
Yes.
And you can see it in their actions. You can see it a bit in the tenseness. And I understand it, even, just as a parent, just as, my family being perceived different, you are isolated even when you're with people. Right? Because sitting down and talking about just some of the things that happened in your day, some of the things that happened with your kid at school, some of those kinds of things, you can't open up to everybody about who you are and what's going on in your life, very much for fear of how are they going to take this? I got to make sure I'm, especially if I'm at work or something like that, you know what I mean? But even just in regular conversations, social situations, and unless I'm at a specific event, I can't freely share who I am and feel like I'm doing so safely, feel like I'm going to be able to do so without ridicule or possibly being attacked or ostracized in this situation.
And that's being a transparent, right?
And that's being a transparent. And so walking through your life with that magnified, you can see how that turns a person into an island, turns a person inward and away from everybody else, even when they're around people. And it's actually, to me, it's one of the real rewarding parts of sitting through trans family dinners, is being able to see those subtles, because I'm a person of subtlety. I'm an observer of human behavior.
Me too.
I would say you're very subtle,
but
in the best ways.
Watching those subtle changes come over people in their interactions, watch people slowly meander towards another group or another person and start a conversation, and relax as they are able to have that conversation as themselves. And to watch that develop, to see how that kind of nourishes them in ways that I know that they haven't had in a long time. And it's not necessarily overt. It's just watching that light inside them kind of grow brighter. Mm-hmm. Right?
He said it. He said the light. Okay, I feel like we should have a buzzer or something every time we talk about the light.
the light. I was going to say,
that's the spirit of the Calos Coalition. That's exactly what we want to bring out in people.
I literally was going to say, in my head, I was like, it's beautiful. And then I'm like, it's Calos. Like, it's so, it's beautiful to watch transformations. And 93% of communication is nonverbal. So if you are observing, it's watching people just open up. And that, and you see that whether it's a social setting like the trans family dinner, or socially transitioning so that they can begin to, go into their socialized setting and be more authentically themselves.
Absolutely.
And that is beautiful. Right. And so I think all of that transformation is really great.
It's not unique to cis people. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Go ahead. Say
it's really not, just because I was thinking, you think about like a new lawyer going into a law office or something and getting acclimated and then finding their footing and actually you're starting to succeed in their work. Or even if you're just any job, it doesn't matter if the lawyer is an example, but you find that you start to glow. You find that the people around you start to accept you more, and you become a part of a community that is producing and is beautiful in its own way, whether it be value, abstractly to capitalistic sense, or if you're just producing those relationships and you're actually making things happen.
Well, there's something I did want to bring up before we lose it too much on what Melissa was saying earlier about the importance of children seeing those trans adults. There's an important, and I know this personally, because I don't have an adult trans child. My child's young. There is an importance and an impact of a parent of a trans child meeting and interacting with a trans adult.
Yeah.
Because if we're being honest, there's a lot of fear that comes with being a parent of a trans child.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to accept sometimes because I don't want to. I don't want it to be that way, but I know there is.
Yeah,
well, I said just last year, I had to have a conversation with my oldest, Alex, because they have a trans inclusive flag, a huge one, flying outside of their home. Mm-hmm. And they live in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And because of this manufactured outrage and violence, increasing violence towards trans people, I am worried about my child. And I don't want, it's never a conversation I want to have, because I am someone that says, be authentically you. Do not be afraid to say who you are, to put yourself at the forefront and say you accept me exactly as I am, or, I will not engage or interact with you. It's for me as a parent to say, listen, I'm worried that somebody could harm you because you have this on the outside of your home.
And that's the latent effects of fascism.
It is that kind of fear. And so, as having a child, my my oldest transitioned as an adult, began their transition as an adult, has been, identified as queer since pubescence, really, like, right, adolescence, really, right? Same. Yeah. And so, and I mean, we very supportive family, and so but I don't know what it's like as a parent to have a parent of a minor child, and those fears because of the irrational emotions that teenagers have, and parents also, low information parents.
Well, and just knowing what they're going through in school, knowing the constant grind on their mental health, outside of anybody targeting them. But then there's also, because there is such a hyper focus on this one aspect of who they are throughout society. And even in a lot of ways, I try very hard in my home to really not focus, on that one aspect in all things all the time. It's really because I'm very aware that hyper focus on that one aspect, the energy and time defending that one aspect and all of that, you lose all these other things and all these other thoughts. You're so focused on your child just making it to adulthood. And that's one of the big things about meeting all these trans adults, right? Is because it's not just meeting a trans adult. It's being able to see some other aspects that are hard to focus on in the moment and in certain things like that person's a teacher. And that person makes music. And that person delivers for UPS. And all of those real aspects of them not just growing up, but living a life.
Having a future.
Having a future.
Having a family. Having those things that we're talking about that are cornerstones of my everyday reality, things that I worry about for myself and then I worry about for these kids. And that's what unites us, I think, beyond all of this, why we're a trans family when it comes down to it. And if I can be that for one kid, if some kid can look up and say that person survived, or Miss Racine, who's 67, she'd hate if I tell her name. Oh my gosh, I don't even think that should. Don't tell me. Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. Cut that out.
Edit.
But the fact that some of those folks, I was listening to my support group and saying a lot of those, we talk about the AIDS epidemic, and they would say, in the 80s and 90s, they talk about the boys, but they never talk about the girls. They never talk about those different aspects and folks that aren't here, and the lack of that knowledge and representation. And that's also part of the hate, putting us in the closet, making us ashamed, even especially older trans folks, the idea that you can't transition, that your voice isn't this way, or that you're too tall, or you're this hormones, and that's stuff that's weaponized against cis women all the time too. And it's against cis men and trans men. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to get off on
visibility. You're right. Isolating out the rest of that information about people is a big part of that, because then you're not attacking a teacher at your kid's school. You're not attacking the person that drops off your mail. You're not attacking somebody that serves in the armed forces and protects our freedom. You're just attacking a trans person. That's all they are.
Yeah. And there's a cognitive dissonance that a lot of folks that hate trans people come down to. I remember talking to someone who will not be named on this podcast and telling them, they would say, I've never just, I came out to them. I said, I don't know how to accept this. I've never met a trans person before. I've never met someone who's transitioned. And I was like, dude, your cousin's trans. Because there is a blindness, there is a very much wanting to put us in the closet, because out of sight, out of minds, because there's a level of discomfort that they have with our existence for a whole bunch of reasons we won't get into. But I think that when we're talking about that hatred and that blind, it goes hand in hand. They don't even see it as hate because they don't even want to open their eyes that wide. That's almost an inconvenience sometimes. And that hurts.
Well, and I think that's a big part why they try and play up certain things, is to make it seem, for people that have not interacted with trans people and all of those sort of stuff, it makes it in their minds this, I have to do this whole different thing. I have to treat this person so differently.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, is building that in their heads, this construct of difference, and how that difference is going to have to make them act differently, because they'll have to treat this person different because they're.
I think it's because we've gendered everything in this world, right? We have literally gendered everything. We've gendered clothes. We've gendered toys. I mean, we gender our cars. I am certainly guilty of it. Dolly is a badass bitch sitting out there, you know? I'll be honest, I'm kind of a misandrist. So most of everything, my plants, I literally live, you know, everything is a woman to me, you know, when I gender it. But we have to address that. My oldest is 29. When they were like 12, they said, when I said, "Oh, that's a boy's shirt," and their response was, "Mom, clothes don't have gender." And I was like, valid point. And it literally, I mean, I'm telling you, when a light bulb went off about that, I was like, oh, and then through, you know, we were always gendered toys. Alex always wanted to play with dinosaurs. No baby dolls, no Barbie dolls, none of those things. So what did we do? We bought dinosaurs. That's what we did, you know? And because awesome. That's what they wanted to play with. Because what does it matter, right?
Well, I think that there's also, and this is very intra-trans community political to talk about, but the differences between being a trans femme or trans woman, or a trans masc or trans man, where your different experiences, because a lot of this is, not to get too off topic, but the sexualization of children is this big topic. Yeah. And as someone who grew up, and I have lots of these very strong memories about different gendered things getting beat up, wanting certain ways, dressed, not being allowed, those things being disallowed in the house, those things being treated as if somehow I was perverted just because I wanted to, like, these things were like, I was sexualized by those folks who saw me doing things that if I was a little girl, in their eyes would not have been weird, or would not have been sexualized. So sometimes I think that's one of the things that really hurts me to talk about trans folks, or people who are talking about liberation for trans folks, and also challenging these sexist, let's be called what they are, tropes, is that they completely overwrite how trans kids themselves are being sexualized. Because here I am, a 7-year-old child, you know, dressing in mom's clothes and sort of stuff that is innocent, you know, and I look back on some of those things, and I had to go through this with therapy because there's so much shame and self-hatred that was built in to this thing happening, and being not just, you know, beaten into me at school and in different places, but at home, that's wrong. And I don't mean to ramble. It's
no, but I mean, even you bring up something just with the clothing, right? I have a sensory disorder with my, ADHD, and for me, I look at how things feel, and I also apply that to how I feel in my clothes, right? And so when our, you know, like you said, you're like you probably loved the feeling of the dress, exactly, the material, how you felt, how it fit on your body, right?
Even wanting to play house,
or playing house, and being the mom.
There's all sorts of little memories and things that I can go through like that, because it isn't about the gender necessarily. It's about the experience and who you are, right, and that gets filtered through the gender after the fact, right, and then those things are put on you or taken off of you, or those sorts of things. And it's also weird because there were adults that just let me get beat up. Because the idea was, sissy, toughen him up, that sort of idea. And, we overwrite a lot of this stuff. We want to pretend that somehow it's more healthy to live in this heterosexist patriarchal world because of why? No.
It's the same with a couple 5-year-olds chasing each other around, a boy and a girl chasing each other around, like, oh, look at them, like trying to, give one a kiss or something, like, and oh, look, oh, ha, 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 they're going to get married one day. But if two little boys were doing the exact same thing, what do we think would happen?
I mean, I can tell you what would have happened in the 90s.
Tell me.
Oh, please, let's not get into it. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah.
It's the type of thing that would have been stopped. And if there was older kids, older boys, a lot of times they would step in and correct that behavior. And by correct, I'm using air quotes, folks, on the podcast.
Well, to me, it's always been very interesting how it's sexualizing when it's two of the same sex together,
Right.
or a trans person, but it's not sexualizing when it's a heterosexual relationship, when it's a man and a woman together. It's not sexualizing when it's the Dallas cheerleaders dancing in a skimpy uniform versus a drag queen. You know, it's not sexualizing when it's done through the heterosexual lens. Then it's not sexualizing. See mom and dad hold hands, that's not teaching kids sex, but seeing dad and dad hold hands, that is.
Oh, it's more acceptable for a 22-year-old to marry a 16-year-old. Personal experience. Because we were a heterosexual couple, right? The same people dehumanizing, disrespecting people in the LGBTQ community are the same people who will marry off their fucking children.
Well, I think it comes back down to procreation for a lot of folks. I mean, we go back to like the historical roots, and like, if you read it through different queer theory and things like that, it'll talk about how this idea of unproductive bodies that don't produce children are evil or unheard. And I think this idea of the trans family is so radical and important to push because we are deconstructing these ideas. And what we're doing, we're challenging this idea that we are not productive, and also that we are inherently sexual, that we are wholesome, that we do have, that we are not in any way to be seen as this other that's outside. We are part of the community, and that's what I think is important. And then also, and I don't mean to keep ranting and ranting here this evening, but you brought up this concept of wanting to put the flags away, or the fear of having these flags away. And I wanted to talk a little bit about our Trans Safe Space List program.
Yes, I was going to ask about that next.
That's an initiative that we are currently trying to get off the ground. We're trying to find the proper funding to implement it correctly and work with the cities. But what we want to do is make sure, you know, the example you gave, if you have one pride flag, you have one trans flag on the street, that place might not be safe. But if we are able to get a bunch of flags on the street, then it just isn't worth the time of those safe to do every single one of those places. And I also feel like it's very important for us, especially here in Hampton Roads, as we're such a diverse community, we got to get out there and put the like everyone welcome sign first, because we do not want to allow there to be no Jewish, no trans folks, no black person. These ideas of like, well, my religion says this, I shouldn't have to do this. We have to focus on public accommodation, civil society, on that light shining in every corner that is a public space as brightly as we can maintain it.
But Thea,
what's up?
If we put everybody's welcome here with them little rainbow signs, you know, people gonna walk in the door and be like, you are trying to indoctrinate me. It blows my mind how many people are offended at the everybody is welcome, or this is a safe space. You know what I mean?
If you're indoctrinated by a rainbow, just go on, tell on yourself. Tell us you're bisexual a little louder.
I know, right? Have you heard the latest movement of taking the rainbow back?
What's that?
Like the evangelical Christians, they're going to take the rainbow back. They've taken the rainbow back. And I literally was out shopping, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I actually saw a woman in the store I was wearing. And I don't even remember what it said, but it was something. And I think she had it on like a Noah's Ark boat or something. It was literally the worst graphics ever printed on a t-shirt. And it was something to the effect of taking back the rainbow. God's promise, I think, is what.
I mean, the thing that drives me so nuts about that indoctrination comment is that it's such a false comparison. Being trans or a member of the LGBTQ community is not a belief system.
No.
It's not a lifestyle choice. You know, members, trans, and we know trans people that are Christian. We know trans people that are atheists,
absolutely. Jewish,
Buddhists,
Satanists. Like, I don't know if you,
Satanists. Yeah.
Being a member of the LGBTQ community is not a belief system. It is simply just a part of who people are,
society,
and this concept that somebody or anybody is asking somebody to. Or forcing a belief system on them is not the case. The only thing that is being demanded is the acknowledgement and respect and protections that everybody else gets.
And it's really wild to me when we start talking about it going beyond, in these public cases or businesses, because there's an economic argument to be made. Like, do you not want the money? Are you able to just write off, 1.6 to 3% of the population? Do you just not want that in your market share? Never mind the trans family, all the LGBTQ plus family that's extended to talk about 20, 30, 40% of the market share. Why would you want to alienate? And this idea that there's even a need to have a competition with these Bud Light, all these weird, that right there is a bunch of hateful folks who have way too much time on their hands. I mean, like I said, there's 90,000 kids that are homeless in this country. What are you doing?
Bullies always need someone to pick on.
Not just that, they got to pick on a case of beer.
I know, right? Like a bad beer at that. I mean, sorry, not sorry.
It was so great to catch that clip of Kid Rock drinking Bud Light in the club. God. After all of that.
And all the meltdowns, like the TikToks of all these dudes with their like lifted diesel trucks, and they're like driving over the case of beer that they just paid for, bro. Like, what are you doing?
We're drinking Coors, who also heavily supports the LGBTQ community.
Truck nuts are gender affirmation. I'm just going to say that. Sorry, buddy. You're just trying to prove something to somebody here.
I mean, listen.
You're angry at Packers and you got yourself...
You shouldn't be sexualizing your truck.
Yeah, stop sexualizing your truck. That's right. How can, on the trans wish list, how can we help?
Yes. Well, with the trans safe space list right now we're putting out, that's kind of being developed. We're looking for grant money, but another one of the programs that you brought up is our trans wish list. And these are things that we're trying to implement right now with the podcast, because I feel like when we get it out there and tell people, hey, if you come to us and tell us either A, your story, we have a certain storybook portal, or B, your wish, your goal, your dream, your need, the thing that's going to get you not just from A to B, but from A to C. When you tell us that, we're able to use that information to advocate for you on behalf of some partners, as well as take that information and forward it to other organizations. Believe it or not, the trans community, I know this, believe it or not, it's hard to actually get in touch with. And a lot of times the same siloing, the same sort of fear, the same sort of thing, it means that actually getting these moments of intersection where people will tell you what they actually need, because they're few and far between. They're afraid. They're expecting that someone is going to tell them no, or they're not expecting that someone could help them. So even if you do get them in a situation where you're talking to someone in a shelter or transitional housing or some circumstance like that, as a social worker, you're dealing with housing, you're dealing with cars. But what about jobs? What about things that they would want for themselves or beyond those things? And I think that the trans wish list really does ask the question and beg the question in the community, what does it mean to thrive? And what is joy for you? And asking that sometimes is simple. Sometimes it's, I need my car fixed because I need to be able to go see my kids every weekend because I want to be there for them. And these are the things that people don't think about. But when you don't have a family member to call, when you don't have a community that cares, when you're not able to reach out to different religious organizations or things because they would discriminate against you. I mean,
so many things are access.
And they're also cutting so much of the public. So these sorts of things become harder and harder for vulnerable populations. And this is especially true for folks that are suffering multiple intersections of oppression, folks who may be immigrants as well as trans folks, who are maybe Native folks or folks who are Black or brown, those folks who are dealing with like systemic systems of inequality that compound. And for me, I feel very privileged. And I want to take the platform that we're building and I want to lead with beauty and joy and say, we can fundraise off this. We can make people want to be a part of this, brands, companies, communities, and we can take that and actually elevate that 20, 30, 40% of the community that is ostracized. And we can make a demonstrable dent in that long-term effect where it's like, okay, you don't have support, you don't have a family, but we can try to be there. And we can't guarantee it, but the more support and sponsorship that we can get, hopefully we can fulfill more and more. And also networking with other, but I'm sorry, I could go on and on about the wish list. It's a very ambitious program.
No, I love that. And the safe space list.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Well, right now we have the application well developed. We've had some volunteer folks who have done some wonderful UX design, and our plan is to go zip code by zip code all throughout the seven cities here in the 757, and solicit every business and public accommodation to see where they stand on civil rights, public access, those sorts of things. We've been interviewing and slowly developing a questionnaire and solicitation process that's community informed. So we have different people that are telling us this is the way the question should be worded or not questioned. And we're hoping to get as much information as we can from business owners and folks who are willing to work with us. We want to pull all the information from Google, Yelp, work with the GIS systems that are in the local cities and build these large databases and get volunteers to go out and run these solicitations, ask these questions, find out, so that if you're an ally and you're thinking, okay, well, I can talk about these and do this, I can donate, but I want to do more. Or maybe you don't have money. Maybe there's other things you want to do. These are ways you can pick up a 10 packet, a 20 packet in your zip code. And you can go out and say, I'm going to go ask these questions and solicit. I'm going to deliver these things and follow up on them and work with us after you've been trained, of course, as we're doing a training process as well. It's like I said, again, a very ambitious program, but it's one that we're hoping to do in partnership with some of the other nonprofits and organizations in the area, because when I looked out there at those gaps, everyone has a CSV list. Everyone has a list of organizations, but having something that is comprehensive, that actually goes through and can expect to get anywhere from 40 to 80% of the community over the course of years actually surveyed, that's something that isn't done, that doesn't exist, and your Googles and your Yelps don't give that sort of information.
They do not. And are you going to have like a no-go list for businesses that are anti?
I will not be the one making the no-go list, and I want to be very clear to all the conservatives who may be upset about the very idea. If you're going to argue that it's your free speech, that it is your religious right and to deny me service, then please speak very loudly into the microphone and tell everyone in our community that you are not welcoming certain people. And the idea here is that is not going to help your business. I think about, this is great, I don't want to pull their specific, was that brewery out in Norfolk?
Oh yeah, which the city council for that meeting is on Tuesday. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would love to go run the solicitation past them. I would love to ask them if they plan on opening a bit, because if that is your free, if you really truly believe that's your religious liberty, speak up. Oh. Please tell us all of that, what you don't want to serve and how you don't want to deal with certain people.
They're anti-LGBTQ.
So I don't think I'm the one making the no-go list. I think they're making the no-go list, and I'm trying to inform our people, because ultimately, if you take in a trans child as a family, just trans parents, and you're going to all of a sudden be questioned down by the owners or by the staff or something like that, that can be traumatic.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Please go ahead, shout it out loud. I want to know exactly where to not spend my money.
That's exactly right.
I worry sometimes about the backlash. Like, oh no, we've created this list of places, but that's why we want to do such a large and comprehensive program. If we created just a small list of trans-owned businesses or queer-owned businesses, we might as well be painting a target or doing the work of folks who want to harass but if we go more comprehensive, if we're able to get the community on board to do a larger program that actually is not just looking for the safety of trans people, but for the safety of folks across intersectional identities. Because as we were talking about earlier, it's not just about being trans. What about being Black and trans? What about being Native and trans? Not every space is going to be safe for people for lots of different reasons.
Intersectionality, yeah.
And I really like the comprehensive list idea, and even having, that kind of when you're describing the business, and I think we were talking before about having kind of like a color-coded system or something along those lines for each business that shows like, oh, they're good for this and this and this, but not this.
It's literally like green, yellow, red, right?
It's something along those lines that we're actually developing. It's not so much about like specific color, like it's safe go or not, but it's about having like the color so people know this place really works hard and has done lots of training, but they've had instances where things have been bad. Depending on the aggregate score, the system that we're developing, it would have to be like, okay, how much do you give to the community? Because we're also asking these businesses in the solicitation, like, how much do you give in charitable giving? What sort of organizations do you give? What sort of training and benefits do you give to your employees? And those are the sorts of things that filter into in a micro way, all these little points that add up to how do they treat. And there's a few other things, innovations that we've isolated from the interviews and different process we've done. Things like, could we get confirmed user reviews and having a verification system where it's not just random people spamming with reviews. We have a verification system at the Calos Coalition. It's really important. We want to make sure the folks that are there are who they say they are. And if they start messing around, we can actually block them and get them out.
Well, if you find a way to do verified reviews, you let me know, because when I got all that media attention fighting this fight against the Virginia Beach City Public Schools and the Youngkin model policies for trans students, my business, of course, I got doxxed, which I don't keep myself or identity, my business or any of that a secret, really. But, a very prominent MAGA conservative attorney decided, who has quite an extensive local following, decided to, he was like obsessed with me for like a week, and posting about me on his social media for like a week. And so we were just getting like, negative reviews and people that, so I took the time to go and I don't have you in my system. And just for the record, we will always stand firm in support of the LGBTQ community, blah, 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 but that is the kind of nonsense, right, that the conservatives will do to businesses for just supporting.
You are preaching to the choir, because just for me being on Twitter, I'm not anybody. I don't have a lot of followers.
Right.
I'm just some trans girl on Twitter. There'll be people that'll seek out just to tell me that they hate me, that I should kill myself, that I should do. They go out of their way to spread their hate because it's within themselves. And I can only imagine when the more public you get. And that's why I think we have to stand together. This all comes back to what we started with, allyship. When a business fills us out, whether they're a Black-owned business, whether they're a queer-owned business, a woman-owned business, whether they're whether they're just owned by a cis white dude, and they're saying, I want to stand and be a part of the community, they're protecting all of us together. Because there is this idea that it doesn't matter whether you're, an immigrant, whether you can speak English, you should be safe when you go into a business and public accommodation in the United States. And if you can't say that, if you can't stand up, or you're legitimately having problems with that, that's where we want to give opportunities to business owners to say, here's some resources at ODU, at TCC, here's some other things going on about DEI. Here's ways that you can train your employees and create a better environment, because those intersections for small and medium-sized businesses they're harder to navigate. Yeah. And if we can get at those junctures and say, hey, let's educate, let's get your managers, let's get your core people on top of this stuff, or at least get them resources, there could be a slow and demonstrable effect. And the one other thing I want to say I think is really coolly isolated is that we're hoping to get businesses, especially the ones that serve people like food service or public accommodations, to agree to get the owners and managers' photos. It's something that's really important as a trans person or a trans family, that if you are in a place, you may not always know it's safe. You may not always have the employee who you're dealing with be safe, especially in the way that they're advancing their legal arguments. They're saying, it's your personal religious liberty. Well, this person might not want to serve or might create some sort of issue. You need to be able to know, is it worth creating an issue right now? Right. They can report, and we can actually follow up through our volunteer systems and our trained people to do that themselves, or they can isolate the people who are in charge by actually having like the photograph of the person. You can look around and say, hey, this is this business, here's these things. And a lot of these things, it factors into the business's willingness to put that information out there, to whether or not their score will be higher. So we're trying to incentivize them to have a higher and higher score, so that they can say, no, like, we're not trying to hide anything. Why would we? I pay taxes to the government. The government knows who I am. The IRS is on me. I want everyone come and patronize my business, give me money. And if you have some other agenda, if you have some other idea of, then you're not really running a business. Right. And I'm all for your freedom of speech, and you have a private club, and that's cool. But we as a community should know that I shouldn't be like, let me stop into this Arby's and have a terrible afternoon where someone, causes me to break down, or much worse, someone's child.
Right. Or yes, exactly.
And I think that's a big part of it too, is you open the business to serve the public or not.
Correct. Right. And making everyone feel safe. I mean, it's a shame that we have to even consider this concept, right? But until we are in a world where everyone is accepting, is caring about the humanity of this world, which we don't have right now. We just don't. I just, maybe one day. But I know that you've got some events coming up. Do you want to talk about? Oh, yes. Yes. I could go on and on about the projects and programs. We do have some great events. We've got the Trans Family Dinner, as we discussed, on December 13th of this month. And we're going to be hosting another one next month. I have to look up to make sure I got the date on that. I'll look it up while I'm telling you about other things. Okay. We've got a card making workshop on the 16th at the Creative Reuse Center in Norfolk. That's at the MacArthur Mall Center, which is a
fantastic location, very accessible. And beyond that, we also have an interest meeting, but that's tomorrow. So I don't even think this podcast will get online before that'll happen. So.
What about Breakfast with Santa? And do you have any?
Oh yes. Thank you so much for reminding me. The Urban League and the Way of Hope have doing a Breakfast with Santa on December 16th. Do we have the address for that? It's pulled up.
We do not.
Oh my goodness. We'll get it in a second.
But why don't you do that while I really think Thea talking to us about the work that the Calos Coalition is doing, and really want to encourage everyone to follow the Calos Coalition on social media and the website.
And the website, it's caloscoalition.com. Actually, Thea, if people want to get involved, they want to volunteer, they want to donate some money, how do they do that specifically?
Okay. The best way to get involved with us right now is to donate directly. A lot of our programs are in a fledgling state, so the financial support, if you're interested in being a coordinator or volunteering, we have a partnership with Volunteer Hampton Roads. They're a subsidiary of the Chamber of Commerce here, and they're a wonderful organization. You can go online and fill out application there, and there will be lots of follow-up information. We have forms that are put through that'll follow us. We have onboarding processes so that you can learn about our systems and come in and help us develop these things. You can also help us with our events, because we're always needing people that are hospitality, people at tables, people that can help set up. And if you have a background in early childhood development, or if you have a background in programming or development, those are things that we could definitely use right now, because we are, as I said, we are bootstrapping this thing as we're searching for grants. And that's really where we're at. We also have memberships. That's another way. You can go to caloscoalition.com/membership. We have some really cool little membership cards. They actually get embossed and everything on them. They got little numbers on them so that you will have your own unique one with your pronouns and name. So it's a great gift idea too. If you want to show the trans or queer person in your life, you can get a membership. That way you show them, hey, I'm supporting materially help fulfilling trans wishes, as well as get someone in your life like a small little card that's got their true name and pronouns on it. You know, sometimes the DMVs don't want to give them to in certain states nowadays, which is shameful. I feel like, what state was that? Minnesota?
Which one? Which one? Sorry.
I don't know. I don't want to give out bad information.
I know. I know where I'm actually about to talk about Florida. So my immediate go-to when people ask me a state is, it's probably Florida, but
you're not wrong. There's something going wrong with trans people probably.
Stop complaining about how bad you have it. There are people literally living in Florida right now.
That's right. Yeah.
And matter of fact, our events director, Heather, she actually moved here from Florida with her child, her 19-year-old trans child. She fled, and she had family that was here, and I'm so grateful, because Florida's loss. Heather is an incredible person. Her family is an incredible.
Very excited.
And the idea that they're chasing away people that are capable, it's so shameful. I can't even get it through my head sometimes. But I digress.
But I mean, Heather's children will get a much better education, because Florida's Department of Education is just taking a total shit under DeSantis. So hopefully I'm very sad for a lot of those kids that, that are growing up.
Not all of them can or have the ability to get out.
To get out. That's exactly right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us about Calos Coalition. We are going to get on some news and would just love some commentary. This is one of my favorite things. Are we ready to talk about Marjorie Three Toes? That's what I call her. Her name's Marjorie Taylor Greene, and if you're familiar, she's...
Join us next week for part 2 of our discussion with Thea Ross. Our theme music is by SKS. If you enjoyed the show, please check us out on all the socials at Talking Transparency, or check out our link tree at Talking Trans. Visit our website at talkingtransparency.com, and please consider supporting us at patreon.com/talkingtransparency.